What is going on, guys? Well, sneaking out the GSXR 1000, got a little bit of a time opening in the schedule, and what better way to fill it, right? What I wanted to talk about in this video is the difference between your middleweight and the leader bike that you may be looking to pick up. And one of the questions that's come up a couple of times on the channel has been, a little sound check for you. One of the things that's come up has been, what is the difference? If I'm going from a middleweight to a leader bike, what am I going to expect to be the differences? And it's a heck of a good question. So let's chat about it. Without talking specifically about power. If you're getting your new leader bike, one thing you have to remember is that yes, it's a lot more power, but it's not always going to be trying to make peak power. They're actually pretty docile. And believe it or not, if you short shift these things around, say 8,000 or 8,500 RPM, they're just like your middleweight. They put down about the same power to the rear tire at that RPM. It's just up here that it's going to be a little different. But in terms of tip-in, like right here coming through carousel, a leader bike is a little bit slower to tip in. A little bit larger rear tire is going to make it a little bit slower, but that along with a slightly longer wheelbase will also add to that slightly slower tip-in feel. But shifting here at 8,000, you see what I mean? You're still putting down the same amount of power. It's just you're taking very early upshifts with the leader bike. So in that respect, not a whole lot different other than the slightly slower turn in. Now then, what about riding along down the highway? Well, here at regular highway speeds, there's really nothing different except for one thing, and that is typically the leader bikes are going to have significantly stiffer suspension, so be aware of that. Now look, if you're not out crushing lap times, you're just out having a blast on your favorite BNC roads, go ahead and soften the thing up. All of these bikes are fully adjustable. There's absolutely nothing wrong with playing with some suspension settings, making the motorcycle more comfortable. In fact, what I've done with my GSXR 1000 is I've made it eerily similar in terms of feel to my 636. And it was my middleweight that really taught me a few things about suspension setup. That 636, as whack as it was, well, all the time that I spent with that made me realize that my leader bike was a little bit lacking in certain areas. So what I like to do for the street, set your bike up for like 34 millimeters of rider sag up front, somewhere around 33, 34 out back. Set your hydraulics up somewhere in the middle, and chances are that is going to be a very good street suspension setup for you, and it's the same setup that I've got on my 636. Very compliant, which is what you want for the street. One of the problems that you may discover if you've moved from a middleweight to a leader bike is little expansion joints have a nasty habit of being jarring. You know, some of the stuff we're hitting right now may not be coming up on camera, but bridges, overpasses, things like that, yeah, they can be a bit disrupting to the senses. And so, yeah, definitely the suspension is going to be a noteworthy set of changes that you're going to be making over your middleweight. But outside of that, guys, they're so very similar. At this point, just cruising on the highway, this is nothing but windshield time. We're just clicking along at the speed of traffic. Now, when it comes to roll on, like we're in 6th gear, we're just going to roll on the throttle. Okay, yeah, big, substantial difference, right? But it depends on which middleweight we're talking about now. Because see, here's the thing. If we're talking about one of these new gen middleweights, the super middleweights, if you will. The RCR 990, the R9, V2 Panigale. Those bikes, pretty decent CC engines. Basically, they're 900cc bikes, right? So, basically the same as a liter bike? Well, only in displacement. You see, the thing is that they make all their power down low. So, with that being said, they feel a lot like a liter bike at low RPM. Matter of fact, they may even feel a little bit stronger. So just this initial tip in the throttle for the bigger middleweights, it's going to be very similar. And as far as tipping goes, let's go ahead and get her set up, get her through the corner. You know, I gotta tell you, a middleweight with the smaller rear tire is going to set into that corner a little bit easier, but no less stable. But my goodness, this liter bike, I just love Gixxers so much. Oh. Nanny intervention. But really, when it comes to the riding experience, one versus the other, here we are just kind of fanning through the gears. Partial throttle with the liter bike feels a lot like any middleweight if you're just on it a little bit more with the throttle. In terms of ergonomics, that depends on which liter bike we're talking about, but most of the ones I've been riding lately, guys, they're pretty comfortable. CBR 1000 RR is the only one of the liter bikes that is as close to a middleweight as you can get in terms of, you know, like wheelbase and all of that. The liter bikes typically have a longer wheelbase. But outside of that one bike, they all feel very, very similar. They're all sporty. The rider triangle is very similar. So don't worry so much about that. When you first get your first liter bike, the main thing you want to do is kind of work into the right-hand side of the tach. I know that for most guys, that's why you're buying the liter bike. But it's best to work up to that. It's not like you've never experienced an acceleration rate like a liter bike can provide. It's just that the liter bike provides it with less aggressive gearing, which means that you're collecting mile an hour a lot faster than you would on that middleweight. Let's go ahead and get to the right side of the tire. And that doesn't change bike to bike. That sensation of just carrying a decent clip through a sweeper, you're not really in it to win it. You just want the bike on the side of the tire and you're wanting to feel the sensation of clipping along like that. Yeah, they're both going to offer that pretty much at the same rate. But I will say this, if you are coming into a liter bike from a middleweight sport bike and it's a 600, maybe a 636, one of the things about these bikes is that they're not so different in terms of how they feel and in terms of the experience overall if you're just kind of putting around, because they both, I mean, they both rev out, they both sound great, they're both 4 cylinders. The very aggressive gearing of that middleweight is going to make it very snappy. So only when you start to tip into the second half of the throttle on a liter bike and the second half of the tach do they really start to show themselves. I can tell you that my 636, because of the gearing, well, let me give you an example. Okay, so we're in 3rd gear right now on the Gixxer. This is 6th gear on the 636. No kidding, RPM for RPM. Now on the 1000, it's going to be buzzier. 636 is smooth. But yeah, in terms of how aggressively geared, I just wanted to illustrate that for you. 3rd gear is 6th gear. Kind of fun, huh? That's why I say when you're doing power wheelies on a leader bike, here, hold that thought. Let's go ahead and drop in, give you guys an idea for what I'm talking about. Drop in, quick transition over, side of the tire, power wheelie coming onto the Regency sign. Okay, that's leader bike stuff. I mean, you can do it on a middleweight, don't get me wrong, but it's just anyway, as they say, no replacement for displacement, right? So hopefully this may have answered some questions for you if you're coming into a leader bike from a middleweight. Some of the differences, what I wanted to illustrate the most is the tip-in response, how the bike sets up in a corner. It's not totally different. It's just that the middleweight will set up a bit easier. It's going to feel lighter. Again, a lot of that having to do with the smaller rear tire and the shorter wheelbase. But outside of that, guys, they're just sport bikes. One of them just seems to have a lot more punch when you want it. But if you're not in it to win it, they both pretty much are indistinguishable from each other. But post up your experience with your bikes. Did you come into a leader bike from a middleweight? I'd love to hear your experience. And listen, if you've made it this far into the video, consider smashing that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a ton. But I'm going to get out of here. Y'all take it easy.